Chapter 21. A Gathering of Broken Stars. Ithuriel's breath was still shallow and wheezing as his body learned to process oxygen without divine aid. He sat in the dust, running his fingers over his chest where the tear of the morning star had stripped him of immortality. I am not the only one, Ithuriel exhaled, his gray eyes meeting Andrew's. Empyreum does not mention it, Archangel. In the archives, those records are erased. But throughout the ages, not every fall was as loud as yours. Some simply left. Some were cast out for doubts that weren't big enough for rebellion, but large enough to cloud their light. Andrew stiffened. Are you saying there are others like us in this world? Hidden among humans? Yes, Ithuriel nodded. They are called the Silent Ones. They live as smiths, healers, or just hermits in the mountains. They deny their essence to escape the wrath of the heavens and the hunger of the void. But if the Eater is truly awakening through our emotions, their presence is like a fuse. If we don't find them, Empyreum will, and they will use them as fuel to restore the old order. Elara threw her cloak over her shoulders. So, do we have a list? Where do we start? Ithuriel closed his eyes as if trying to catch the last remnants of celestial intuition. I feel an echo to the west. In Fisherman's Bay by the salt cliffs. There is someone there who once belonged to the Order of Virtues. If they still live, their power over water and healing could stabilize the seals more than any weapon. Chapter 22. Fisherman's Bay. The journey to the sea took weeks. Ithuriel had to learn everything. How not to walk his feet into bloody sores, how to eat, and even how to sleep without being terrified by dreams. Andrew led him with a patience he hadn't possessed before, while Elara taught them both how to remain inconspicuous. The salt cliffs were lashed by a constant tide. Fisherman's Bay was a poor settlement where the people looked as old and wrinkled as the nets they mended. That is her. Ithuriel pointed to a woman standing knee-deep in the icy water, helping to pull in a boat. She was not radiant. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and hands coarsened by salt. But when Andrew looked closer, he saw it. The water around her feet did not move naturally. The waves avoided her as if they held her in reverence. Cassiel? Andrew addressed her as she stepped onto the shore. The woman stopped, and her gaze was like the depths of the ocean. She was neither startled nor joyful. I haven't heard that name for 500 years, fallen brother, she said calmly. Here, they call me Mara. And Mara just wants to finish drying her nets in peace. The world is ending, Cassiel, Ithuriel interjected, taking a step forward. Cassiel looked at him and offered a faint smile. I see Andrew taught you how to fall, Ithuriel. It hurts, doesn't it? The weight of a human heart. We didn't come to judge you, Andrew said, pointing to his scars. We came to ask for your help. The Light Eater is waking, and our bond with humanity is the only thing holding him back. We need your stability. We need to unite those who know what it means to lose heaven and love the earth. Cassiel looked at the fishermen in the bay, at the children playing in the sand, and at the horizon where unnaturally violet clouds were already beginning to gather. Do you know why I left? She asked softly. Because in heaven there is no ebb and flow. Only an eternal, motionless brightness. Here things change. Here things end. And that is what makes every moment precious. If you want my help, I will not fight for heaven. I will fight for this dirty bay. That is exactly what we need. Elara nodded. At that moment, the sea began to boil. It wasn't fish that emerged from the waves, but twisted beings of the void with bodies like black glass and many limbs. The Eater had sent his hunters to prevent the unification of the fallen. Andrew gripped the tear of the morning star, Elara drew her daggers, and Ithuriel, though his hands shook, raised a heavy boat hook. Cassiel straightened up and, for the first time in centuries, allowed her power to manifest. The sea behind her rose into a massive, menacing wall. My nets are empty today, Cassiel said, her voice resonating from the depths. But you will be glad to be caught in them. Chapter 23. Baptism by Salt Blood. The battlefield became wet sand and rot-scented seaweed. The creatures from the depths, twisted by the void, surged from the surf like a black tidal wave. Their bodies of black glass absorbed the light and emitted a sound reminiscent of crushing ice. Cassiel stood at the fore, her hands tracing complex circles, and the seawater under her command formed ramparts that crushed the attackers against the cliffs. But with every strike of a wave, Cassiel grew paler. Her human body, which she had grown accustomed to over the centuries, was not built for such an onslaught of divine power. "They're killing her!" Elara cried out, seeing Cassiel sink to her knees. "That power will tear her apart from the inside before she can stop those things." Andrew tried to fight his way to Cassiel through a swarm of glass monsters, but he was surrounded. His spear, the tear of the morning star, shattered the black shells of the enemies, but there were too many of them. Ithuriel stood nearby. He gripped a heavy boat hook in his hands, felt the burning emptiness of his missing wings on his back, and in his heart he felt for the first time what humans call paralyzing terror. It wasn't the fear of an angel facing God's wrath, it was the fear of a mortal facing the end. He looked at his trembling hands and then at Andrew and Elara, who were fighting with utter self-sacrifice. I am just a man," Ithuriel whispered to himself. "I can do nothing." At that moment, however, he saw one of the largest monsters, a colossus with dozens of glass blades instead of limbs, preparing to impale Cassiel, who was too exhausted for further defense. Ithuriel did not make a rational decision. He didn't think about strategy. He simply felt a sudden surge of anger and belonging flood his chest. That feeling was so strong it drowned out his instinct for self-preservation. "Enough!" Ithuriel roared in a voice that was no longer angelic but full of human defiance. He ran. Not with the lightness of a celestial, but with the heavy, dogged sprint of a man. He threw himself directly beneath the blades of the glass monster. One of them cut deep into his shoulder, but Ithuriel did not stop. He braced his feet in the slippery mud and with all his might drove the boat hook into a crack in the creature's chest. "Andrew! Now!" Ithuriel shouted, his blood staining the gray wool of his clothes. Andrew seized the second the monster lost its balance. He lunged and drove the tear of the morning star directly into the creature's core. The black glass shattered into dust. A wave of energy from the shattered monster threw Ithuriel several meters away onto the rocks. The battle fell silent for a moment as the remaining creatures, under the pressure of Cassiel's final wave, retreated back into the depths. Andrew and Elara ran to Ithuriel. He lay in the sand, his breath wheezing, and thick, dark red blood flowed from the wound in his shoulder. "Ithuriel," Andrew whispered, kneeling beside him. "Why did you do it? You could have run." Ithuriel smiled faintly, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. I wanted to know if it was worth it," he breathed with effort. "You were right, brother. It hurts. But for the first time in my life, I actually felt something. I chose this wound. Heaven cannot do that." Cassiel approached them. Her face was lined with exhaustion, but her eyes held a new kind of respect. She placed her salty, cold hands on Ithuriel's wound. Her power manifested as a gentle humming of the tide. The bleeding stopped and the flesh began to slowly close, though the scar that remained would be deep. "You will survive," Cassiel said softly. "You will have a scar to remind you of your first human choice. And that scar will give you greater power than all your lost wings." Ithuriel closed his eyes, exhausted, but with an expression of peace he had never known as an angel. "Did you see that?" Elara asked, looking at the horizon. The violet clouds had not dissipated. Instead, they began to form into the likeness of a massive eye, looking directly at them. "The Eater saw what Ithuriel did. He saw that even those we broke can stand by our side. He no longer fears us just for our power," Andrew said, raising his spear. "He fears us for our ability to change. Cassiel, are you with us?" Cassiel looked at the fishing boats that had survived the battle, and then at Andrew. "The sea is stormy, brother. And I know how to tame storms. I will go with you. We must find the others. If Ithuriel, the coldest among us, could bleed for a mortal, then there is hope for us all." Chapter 24. The Iron Heart of Ferrum. The journey to Ferrum was marked by a gradual transformation of the landscape. Nature here gave way to industrial chaos. Trees were replaced by towering chimneys that spewed thick, yellowish smoke into a leaden sky. Ferrum was not a city in the conventional sense. It was a massive, constantly moving machine of iron, copper, and steam, built within the crater of an ancient meteor strike. The atmosphere inside the walls was oppressive. The city's inhabitants moved in time with the rhythm of pistons, their faces ashen and their eyes hollow. In Ferrum, there was no art, no religion. The only faith was efficiency. "Do you feel it?" Ithuriel whispered, wiping soot from his forehead. "The silence in their souls. It's the same as it was in Empyreum before the fall. No doubt, no passion. Only function." Barakiel, prisoner in the gears. In the center of the city rose the great Cathedral of Gears, which served as the central processing unit for all of Ferrum. The group had to navigate a labyrinth of steam pipes and rotating shafts until they reached the main boiler. There they found him. Barakiel, once an angel of the Order of Powers, was not visible as a single being. His consciousness was poured into thousands of miles of copper wires and pipes. His face appeared occasionally as a relief on the metal wall of the main generator, his eyes formed by glass viewports through which mercury flowed. "Why do you disturb the gears?" Barakiel spoke through hundreds of metal-speaking tubes. His voice was mechanical, composed of thousands of echoes. "Pain has been eliminated. Fear has been filtered out. Ferrum is perfect because Ferrum does not feel. Ferrum is dying, Barakiel!" Andrew shouted, striking the butt of his spear against the metal floor. "Your absence of feeling has created a vacuum that the void is eating through. Look at your people, they aren't beings. They are just parts you discard when they wear out." A short circuit in stasis. The void manifested in Ferrum as black corrosion, subtly eating away at the cathedral's support columns. In his logic, Barakiel ignored it because it represented no emotional threat to him. Andrew understood that he had to force Barakiel into a system shock. He had to restore his human essence. He used the tear of the morning star and, instead of attacking the metal, drove the tip of the spear directly into the main node where Barakiel's essence met the steam. "Remember what it was like to have wings!" Andrew roared, channeling memories of sun and wine through the spear. In that moment, Ferrum experienced something unimaginable. The massive piston stopped. Thousands of gears jammed with a deafening screech. The entire city plunged into darkness. From the speaking tubes, instead of mechanical announcements, came a single, human cry of agony and relief. A figure began to emerge from the generator. Steam condensed into the form of a man with copper-colored skin and hair like liquid silver. Barakiel fell to his knees, feeling the weight of his body and the coldness of the floor for the first time in centuries. "It's too loud," Barakiel gasped, clutching his head. "All this pounding, is that my heart?" The forge of hope. Barakiel's transformation did not destroy the city but awakened it. As the angel became mortal again, his genius combined with his new capacity for compassion. He understood that courage alone would not be enough against the Eater and the heavenly legions. During the final days of their stay in Ferrum, Barakiel opened secret workshops. With Ilara's help, as she described what it felt like to be vulnerable, he forged star steel armor for the entire group. "This metal is not indestructible," Barakiel said, handing Andrew a new breastplate that looked like a work of smithing blended with stardust. "But it reacts to the will of the wearer. If your heart does not waver, this armor will not crack even under the strike of an archangel." As the group left Ferrum, the city was no longer a silent machine. People in the streets were talking, the first flowers appeared in windows, and the rhythm of the pistons was no longer a prison, but the heartbeat of a new alliance. Barakiel walked with them, gripping a heavy smith's hammer in one hand and carrying the burden of his new, painful freedom in the other. Chapter 25: The Army of Scars. The journey from the Iron City back to the Crying Mountains became a march that legends will speak of for centuries. It was no longer just a handful of refugees, but a growing tide of humanity. Andrew, Ilara, Ithuriel, and now Barakiel and Cassiel led a procession that numbered thousands of souls. The campsite beneath the Silver Pass became the heart of a new world. Thousands of fires shone into the darkness like a reflection of the stars that the angels were preparing to extinguish. The atmosphere in the camp was not filled with fear, but with a strange, electric determination. The Council of the Broken. The leaders gathered in the main tent, illuminated only by Barakiel's mechanical lamps. Andrew no longer wore angelic armor, but plates of star steel, forged by Barakiel. Ithuriel trained young men and women in spear combat. His face was stern, but when a recruit stumbled, he no longer mocked them, he reached down and helped them up. Cassiel created a cleansing bath in the center of the camp, where her water stripped people not only of filth but of the nightmares that the void sowed in their minds. Barakiel and his engineers from Ferrum mounted giant ballistae on the camp's ramparts, firing projectiles infused with his own essence. Andrew's sermon in the dust. One night, as the frost from the mountains became unbearable, Andrew stepped onto a high boulder. The people fell silent. They expected a god to speak to them, to promise them heaven. "I have not come to promise you salvation," Andrew began, and his voice, though human, had a depth that cut through the wind. "I have not come to tell you that golden halls await you after death. I have come to tell you the truth. Heaven has forgotten you, and the void wants to devour you. You have only each other." He pointed to the scars on his back, which he now left uncovered. "Angels are perfect, and therefore they are cold. You are injured, broken, and tired. But it is in your scars that there is a strength heaven does not know. It is called solidarity. Tomorrow, fight not for the gods, but for the person standing next to you. Fight for the dirt you walk upon." Elara, the bridge between worlds. While Andrew was a symbol of faith, Elara was a symbol of reality. She walked among the tents, checked supplies, sharpened arrows, and spoke with mothers who feared for their children. She became the mother of the army. One night, Andrew found her sitting at the edge of a cliff. "You used to want to kill me," he said softly. Elara smiled and stroked the string of her bow. "You used to be just another monster looking down on us from above. Now you're one of us, Andrew. Perhaps the most vulnerable one. Those people down there, they aren't going into battle for an angel. They are going into battle for you, because you taught them that even a fallen star can provide warmth." The last night before the storm. The army of scars was ready. Smiths from Ferrum, fishermen from the coast, bandits who had found honor, and simple peasants. Each of them bore the mark of a broken wing on their armor or clothing, a symbol of their refusal to submit to celestial dictates, or the emptiness of nothingness. As the violet smoke of the eater began to rise over the mountains and the white light of angelic trumpets began to flash through the clouds, the army of scars responded with silence. It was the silence of thousands of hearts that had decided they would no longer be mere pawns in the struggle of the powerful. "Tomorrow," Andrew whispered to Elara, "the world will learn that even dust can stop eternity."